I've just recently been informed about the death of an acquaintance of mine by the name of Deb Tambor. And
Actually, admittedly, I did not know her very well, but she is in the OTD community, and so it's a very tragic event. The circumstances of her suicide are definitely related to the fact that she lost custody of her children. So after she separated from her religious spouse, they had a custody battle, and she basically lost custody. And so it seems, I don't know the details of this case, but it seems that her suicide is enmeshed with this fact. So, okay, so I read her timeline on Facebook, and there's an outpouring of anger and sadness and condolences and such. There's a lot of emotion. There's very little reason on the Facebook posts on her page, and so I'd like to infuse some reason into this debate. What it triggered in my mind is the question of how can we once and for all settle this question of who should get custody in a way that would be fair for everyone, and there would be listen, I don't insist that either party is right, but if we can have a fair and consistent way of settling this, then everyone would have, at least they would know the rules of the game, so that they can follow along with the rules. Because right now there are no rules, and the OTD side feels that they're losing out, that they're not getting a fair hearing. Right? They're not, their side is not being properly and fairly represented. So here's what I have to say about this. Okay, I'm conflicted. Unlike many other OTD advocates who insist that there should be either shared custody or perhaps even, I don't know what they the status quo is untenable, that we know. But perhaps they're suggesting that it should go to the irreligious parent. But I am very, very troubled by this. Here is why I'm so conflicted. On the one hand, from a jurisprudential standpoint, from a legal/philosophical standpoint, it is extremely difficult for me to justify the OTD position here. Because we have two parents here. They married. Okay, a marriage is a very serious contract. Okay, not only are you promising to provide and care for one another for the rest of your life, I mean, this is how religious contracts work at least, but you're also, and this is maybe implicit, but it's still part of the contract, which is that you're going to have children together and you're going to raise them together. And you're going to raise them together in the current mode of living. Okay, so if they are married in a religious state, if the parents are religious when they get married, then it is, at the very minimum, it is implied that when they're going to raise their children, they're going to raise their children in a religious manner. And so for one parent to say subsequently, perhaps 4 or 5 years down the road, hey, I'm not religious, and I want to raise my child not religious because I changed my mind, it's extremely, no matter how much I adore this impulse or drive or whatever you want to call it to become, to secularize, no matter how much I support it, how could you're breaking the contract. So how could I, from a legal/philosophical standpoint, justify sympathizing, I mean, for the legal system to sympathize with the OTD? And so this is basically the problem that I'm having, because on the one hand, I believe that, you know, objectively speaking, the lifestyle of the irreligious person is much more normal. You know, it's just a normal way of living. You know, it's normal, it's constructive, and it is better for the children. From an objective standpoint, it is clearly better for the children. They have better prospects of having a job, better prospects of happiness, and most of all, they're more adaptive to nature. I mean, the religious lifestyle is a leftover from the Middle Ages. Okay, it's not an adaptive lifestyle, and it's going to die eventually, but let's not discuss this right now. But the point is, like, from an objective standpoint, it's very clear that the ultra-Orthodox lifestyle is not adaptive. It doesn't help a person to survive. And so clearly, in the interest of the state, and in the interest of any enlightened citizen who wants to help and wants to have a constructive and society where members contribute to each other's well-being, so in those interests, of course, I want to I want to side with the OTD parent, and I want the child being taken out of the custody from the irreligious parent and put in the hands of the irreligious parent. But this is a subjective judgment. Realize that. This is a subjective judgment. I'm subjectively judging that the religious lifestyle is inferior to the irreligious lifestyle. And secondly, this is a state getting involved in the affairs of a private citizen. And I am a strong advocate of libertarianism, and I do not like to see the state getting involved unless there's a very, very compelling reason to do so. And simply the fact that the parents are religious, that is by far not sufficient for the state to get involved, either in trying to change the convictions or the behavior of the parents, and by extension, you cannot do that for the children. Okay, so if the parents want to raise their children religious, of course they have the right to do so. And, where do you draw the line? Okay, so that's a good question. Where do you draw the line? Okay, you can't, if you think that your religion requires your children to kill, for example, and you're going to raise your children on such you're going to feed them a diet of hate, and you're going to, maybe the state should get involved, right? But, I came from the Haredi community, and I can assure you that that's not happening. So we don't have enough reason, enough of a compelling reason to get involved and to try to change their behavior or to remove a child from their custody. So this is why this is a very difficult question, and so here is my solution to this. Here's what we should do. Under the laws of contracts, if I am drunk and somebody comes up to me with a document and asks me to sign it, okay, that signature is meaningless. If I'm seriously under the influence of a drug, or if I'm otherwise manipulated, or if I'm a minor, okay, then these are all grounds for the dissolution of the contract, for the revocation of the contract. And so here's my idea here, a jurisprudential argument in the favor of the OTD. There is a window when an OTD person typically leaves, and that window is usually only during their late adolescence, 18, 19, 20, that's the window. Before that, you don't have enough resources to leave, and after that, you're already married. Typically, they get married young, and so at that point, there is a strong impetus to remain in the system because all the connections and all the support that you're getting is vital for your sustenance. So here's the thing. When you get married, yes, there is a contract. And yes, there is an implied agreement between the spouses that we're going to raise the child with us. But here's the question. To what extent are they lucid enough? Are they in their right mind? And are they informed enough for that contract to be binding? Because, number one, the ultra-religious get married very young. Secondly, it's a cult. Let's face it, cults are legal. Okay, I cannot, again, like I said earlier, the government should not get involved to try to dismantle this cult. Okay, you could, you're not hurting anyone, right? So, the cult is legal, but the question is, if somebody within the cult makes an agreement to do something, how binding is such an agreement? Because this person doesn't know better, right? This person is not properly informed of their options. If you grow up, let's face it, the ultra-Orthodox lifestyle, we all know this, that they literally shelter you. They shelter you not just behaviorally, but they shelter you informationally. They keep adversarial information out of the minds of its subjects. Okay, they don't want people to know that, for example, they don't want them to study biology. I actually had a relatively decent secular education growing up, but biology wasn't in the curriculum. And that's because it undermines the fundamentals of ultra-Orthodox faith, which is creationism, right? And so on and so forth. There's so many other things that are not in the curriculum because it is contradictory to it contravenes the articles of faith. So what I'm trying to say here is that we're dealing with a situation here where the people who are getting married within ultra-Orthodoxy are not informed enough, are not sufficiently informed about their options and about life in general to be making a legally binding decision when getting married to the person. And by the way, this argument could also be used to dissolve the marriage. But I don't really have to resort to this because a dissolution of marriage is relatively easy nowadays, okay? Because the church doesn't control it. The church never controlled Jewish religious marriages anyway. But so obviously, during the medieval ages, the church didn't dissolve marriages easily, right? You have to have a very compelling reason. But nowadays, it's a civil matter, and you can easily get a civil divorce. Simply, we're not compatible, and irreconcilable differences, quote unquote, and you'll get a divorce. So you don't need this argument for the divorce, but it is still an extremely valid argument for a divorce also. Okay, my marriage, to what extent is this marriage really a marriage? If I was just shooed into this, and I didn't really date, right? The ultra-orthodox don't date. There's no courtship process, and so yes, I mean, the government is not going to get involved. They're not going to force people to change their lifestyle. But if, as an adult, one of the spouses come forth and say, I want out of this contract. I was pushed into this. I don't really want this. And so at this stage, I think that the government needs to get involved, and I think this should be grounds for the dissolution of the contract, including the marriage. And again, I'm not saying a divorce. This should actually, the contract shouldn't be valid at all. Retroactively, it should be determined that this is not a legal marriage. And I mean, obviously, if the spouse chooses to present such an argument. And here's the thing. Okay, so if we go down such a route, what would we do? So what? In other words, who would get custody of the child? So here's what I think. I don't believe in joint custody in a religious versus non-religious class. It doesn't work. It confuses the child. Now, I know many religious people, many on the OTD community say, no, it works. I don't think so. I think the judges are right that joint custody is not in the best interest of the children. I know that it's a difficult thing to say because there's going to wind up being a loser, right? So why should it be winner takes it all? But this is what it has to be. If the best interest of the children is the paramount goal in the resolution of this conflict, and I believe it should be. Okay, so if we keep that goal in mind, and if that's going to remain the objective of the court system, to place the child with a parent in whose best interest the child's custody is, then I think that what we need to do is we need to find which parent is better for the children. And so in a case like this, here's my suggestion. If the children are below a certain age, then I think we should go with a non-religious parent. And here's why. It's a cult. Let's make it very clear. Ultra-Orthodoxy is a cult. It is not cooperating with the state, it is not cooperating as much as secular people are in building an informed and contributing citizenry to the nation and to the state and to the community. It is a separationist by definition. Okay, this is indisputable that it is a separationist movement. They cut themselves off from the rest of the world, and they advocate different lifestyle, and they try to keep interaction to a minimum. So this is fact. Okay, so as a society, as a general secular society, it's not in our interest to promote citizens who go off in that lifestyle. And so I think that it's in the state's interest, if it's an even call, if it's either, like if you're gonna, right, if it's an even call, then we'd rather put custody of the child with an irreligious parent. I know this is obviously never going to go through because nobody likes this sort of thinking that I'm doing right now. Okay, we always try to have a flow chart. If so, then so. If so, then so. It should be even, right? Everyone has equal rights. No, forget about the equal rights. Okay, we have to think of us as a society. Okay, people. There's a social compact. We look out for each other. We help each other. Our taxes, our government taxes, go to support other people in cases where they are needy. And so it's not just, okay, let this person do whatever they want and we're not going to judge them. Yes, we do judge them. We do judge the ultra-religious. Their lifestyle is inferior to ours. And we don't want, if it's a close call, we don't want their children to grow up in their households. And so if there's one parent who puts the argument forth and says, I want custody of this child. If the child is below a certain age, then I say, put them in the custody of the non-religious parent, as a matter of routine. Okay? If the close fall, put them with a non-religious parent. If the child is beyond a certain age, if the child is already, let's say, 10 or 11, and maybe younger, the age has to be determined by legal experts and social experts. But if the child is older than a certain age, then I think that at this point, you're confusing the child by uprooting them and removing them from their religious environment for for basically because you chose to leave. So at this stage, I would say that if the children are older than a certain age, then they should stay. Now, of course, if you have more than one child, then again, you have another problem. Should one child go with the religious and the other one with the non-religious? So it could be problematic. But at least I think that a large percentage of the cases could be resolved in such a manner, because if all the children are younger, then it's relatively easy to just put them in the custody of the non-religious parent. And if they're all older, which is also quite common, then it's also relatively easy to make this decision here. So I think this would be like, in a sense, it would be sort of like a compromise, because the OTD gets a little bit, gets a share of the pie, in the sense that if the children are younger, then they get to keep custody, and the religious community gets a piece of the pie. So, in a way, it's sort of like a compromise, and better yet, it has a sense of absolutism and finality to it that obviates the need for the judge to really get involved much. It's simply basically an age matter. Older than that, so-and-so, then we do so. Younger than that, we do so. So I think this is basically my suggestion. Now, of course, I have very little hope or confidence that it's actually going to be carried through. But I think that from a purely philosophical standpoint, this is a very constructive, suggestion.